Hey everyone, today I'm creating some cards using the sketches from the Kendra's Card Challenge number 8. So as part of this challenge, you cut up 6 pieces of 6x6 pattern paper, and then you have 17 card layouts and you create a whole series of cards as one project. I am going to use the Uncharted Waters paper pad from Kaisercraft. This has been partially used. You can see here there's a lot of 2-inch strips, there's a lot of smaller 1/2-inch strips, and then lots of sentiments and other decorations that are part of the leftovers. I think for my previous project I must have cut some 5¼ by 4 panels, which is why I have so many 2-inch strips. So I've laid everything out on my desk, and I've also grabbed a few extra sentiments and bits and pieces. The key thing that I've grabbed is these craft backing panels, and I've got each of the sketches printed on my desk, and I'm going to first use these cut aparts. So they are 3x3, so there was 4 on each page, and I am picking between those 2 different card sketches that have a similar component. So I'm laying everything out on my desk. I'm trying to figure out what papers am I going to match up with them, which one will have the thick strip behind the square, and which I will put the strip across the top. There wasn't really any rhyme or reason why I picked the, I guess the steering wheel of the ship. I'm sure there's a name for that, or the anchor, but I just split them in half and I did 4 of each. I'm now picking some contrasting paper to add to the sketch and some sentiments as well. I put all of that in a pile, and then I'm going to compile them together separately off camera, and I'm just going to show you the results. So these are the 4 cards that I created using card sketch number 2. The next sketch that I used was sketch number 17. I put them in the order that I created the cards, not the order of the sketch numbers, if that makes sense. So I've picked some papers that are going to contrast, and I'm going to put them as the big purple strip in the top right corner that goes behind. So I'm just chopping things down, trying to not create more scraps of paper as I go. I'm really trying to use up each piece if I can. It's not always possible, and I will end up with some bits and pieces to deal with later in the video. But for the most part, I'm trying to actually use the piece that matches the sketch rather than create lots of small, tiny pieces that I need to deal with later. So here's the 4 that I created with sketch number 17. They're very simple, but I really think they'll be loved by someone who loves the outdoors or the beach. They're perfect. All right, on to card sketch number 4. For this one, you'll notice that I'm using the bigger pieces of paper. With the card sketches, some of them are great for when you've got lots of small pieces, but I thought if I can at least use the pattern papers from biggest piece down to smaller, then it means I'm going to have more options when I'm working through. So for this design here, I'm just trying to figure out, do I need to do a portrait or a landscape card to handle those pieces of paper? And you can see that's quite a big pile. I think I did 10 or 12 of those in total, which is great because my goal was to finish off the paper pack. If I did several of the same card layout with the different pattern papers, I wasn't too fussy about whether or not I was having too many of the same design, because they're all going to go to a charity who is going to hand them out to lots of different recipients, and they won't know that there's a similar design that was used for somebody else. All right, so here I'm running through and I'm trying to figure out the orange piece in the sketch on the top right of the screen and something that is going to contrast with the main piece of paper. So I'm working through this, and where possible, I was trying to find one piece that would match with everything so that I could cut it up to be the right size and, again, not end up with lots of leftovers that I needed to deal with. So that rope paper was perfect for a few of them. And then this one that is, it looks almost like a map or some kind of nautical, I don't know. I don't know what it is. If you know what it is, maybe put a comment down below. I feel like my nautical knowledge isn't very strong. So I'm cutting up just some of the sort of creamy tan here, and I'm going to use that for a few of the cards. And then I will chop up that greeny kind of color to use for some of the others as well. The main reason was because I had some of this paper as the vertical, I then needed to use something else as the contrast for that one. So this worked out absolutely perfectly, and this design is really, really simple. I feel like you could create these if you were trying to do something, pretty quickly. Maybe if you were trying to do, Christmas cards for the whole class, for example, if you've got, 20, 30 kids in a class, or maybe teachers. So here we go. They all look a little bit different, and I did use the happy birthday instead of the star, so that was my way to get the sentiment onto the card. Now we're on to card sketch number 15. And so this one is intended to be a giant circle in the middle. So I did adjust this one a little bit. And I used, I guess, the intent of the sketch without the exact layout. So you can see at the top of my screen, I have those two rectangles. Now they were cut aparts that were intended to, I guess, decorate a card. And I thought, due to the size of them, if they went smack bang in the middle like those circles, then I think that that would stay pretty true to the layout, even though not exactly the same. So I found some of these really thin strips. I think these are 1/2 inch. And so running through, just trimming them to the right size. And then once I have all of those components ready to go, I will mat some of them if needed. And here you go, there was 2 cards from that sketch. For card sketch number 16, this one was an interesting one, and the thing that I really like about it is that it's got the 3 strips of pattern paper, and then it's got a large element on top. So I had a couple of these bigger pieces here that had, the anchor and the nets, and I thought if I cut the interesting part off this big piece of pattern paper, then I can use that as a bit of a feature as part of a card. And then the rest of it just becomes some really nice textured paper that I can partner up with something else. So there was 2 of these sheets. So I've now got 4. I've got 2 of each direction of the anchor. And then I'm just going through and I'm picking some papers that I think will work. You'll often see me kind of fan these out and then try and match things up. I was being quite particular with it because I really wanted to make sure that I really liked every card. I didn't want to just grab them, throw them together and hope for the best. I really wanted to make sure that when I put the cards together, I was going to be really happy with how they looked. So I decided to stick with the anchor and the water theme here. And so I've got the little baby anchors and then some of the ocean image. And both of those partnered up super well with the anchor. And on top of those, I then was looking at my desk and trying to find what element could I actually add. And you'll see that there's quite a few sentiments on the top left corner and some little cut aparts that are little rectangles and squares. So I decided that they would be perfect for this card layout. They're not as large as the circle, but they do add the right level of interest. And so that was 8 more cards. For sketch number 5, this has 3 strips of pattern paper that are 1 inch wide. And because I have these 2-inch strips here, they were absolutely perfect for this card sketch. So I picked 3 of the papers that I thought worked well together. And then when I chopped them in half, I was able to get a couple of strips out of each of these and create a series of the cards. I was also trying to work out what was I going to add as that square. I wasn't sure about a sentiment because I don't have any squares left in my stash, and it does look really good to have something that has, a little bit of volume, especially sitting across that horizontal panel. So after I had cut all of these down, I did notice that I had 4 sort of gift tag style cut aparts on my desk. And so I grabbed those thinking that they would be absolutely perfect. And I did get some of my May Arts twine and put those through the top. I find that if I'm using tags and there's nothing through that hole, it just seems a little bit weird. So I did add those, and you can see here I created 4 more cards. The next sketch is sketch number 2. I really, really like this one. This one is one of my favorites. It just has a small strip across the bottom. I had plenty of those on my desk, so I was able to grab some of those really easily. But then this feature panel in the middle really let me highlight some of the really beautiful papers from this collection. In particular, that teal one with the waves. I just think it looks so impactful when you put that on a white matting layer, add a second paper below it, and then with the craft. I just love the colour combination. For me, I feel like this all came together quite well. When I was doing this project, I think the thing that really, really made it work was printing out the sketches and cutting them up. You can see that I'm moving them around my desk in what could be considered an absolute mess. But because I was cutting things up, putting them in piles, and I had the card bases ready to go, I knew that all I needed to do is come back later and assemble them. And I think for me, that meant as I got through the pile of messiness, there was a great deal of satisfaction in getting to the bottom of the pile. I will say I did do this in 2 sittings though. It was a lot of work to do this many cards or prep for them. And so here's 10 with that cool layout. All right, now we're on to card sketch number 7. This one, again, this is one of my favorites. And the reason I love this one is because you can use 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares. Now, in my paper stash, I have loads of paper strips. So I did a project probably more than 5 years ago now, where I used loads and loads of 12 by 12 paper. And then I was left with 1.5 by 12 inch pattern paper strips. There's so many different designs. There is Christmas, there is baby, there is everything you can possibly think of. So I'm thinking about creating a whole bundle of cards just using sketch number 7. I will build myself up to it because it does require a lot of cutting and layering and all the rest of it, but I really, really love this one. And I found that I was able to feature some of these anchor papers, and most of these ones I think are in the blues, so blues and teals. These, again, one of my favorites. And for such a small amount of pattern paper on a card layout, I think that it does not look like it needs more detail or more interest. It's just nice and simple and something that I think you could add for any occasion. I managed to create 8 of these in total out of the Uncharted Waters paper pad. One of the things I get asked about a lot is the backing panels that I use and the thickness or weight of them. I always use, well, not always, most of the time, I just use the weight of copy paper. So in Australia, standard white copy paper is 80 GSM, and that's what I'm using here for these craft pieces. And that's what I also use when I use the grey. So I've just purchased essentially a ream of tinted grey paper, and then I've cut that down, and I've done the same with the craft here. One thing I'll mention about the craft is I get that from Riot Art and Craft. They've recently changed their website to just be riot.com.au, and I use the 80 GSM A3 paper pad, and that gets me 400 panels. Now, I know a lot of people don't create the volume like I do, but if you're wanting to create a ton of cards or have some supplies ready to go, the 80 GSM is on discount at the moment at $10.49, and the 110 GSM is actually 50% off, so it's $7.49. So you could get a slightly heavier weight of the craft if that's what you prefer, and at the moment it is cheaper. I'll put a link down in the description below to the 2 that I use for the grey and for the craft, just in case you find that helpful. For this card sketch here, which is number 11, the sketch actually has the 2 paper strips being 1 inch wide. I just used the concept of the sketch and I just used what I had. So you can see here I'm cutting down some of the fancy borders just to make them nice and simple. I don't often add fancy borders like that to my cards, but I did want to use the paper without wasting it. So I just trimmed off the fanciness and turned it into a simple strip. I then included some of the spare boats that I had from a previous project and one of the sentiments. This next group is using sketch number 12, and again it has panels or little strips that are hosted on a white matting layer. I just went through everything that I had left and tried to figure out if I had enough to create these. You can see my desk is much tidier now. There's only small bits of paper. I have sorted them into lengths so that I can figure out what will work and what will not. And right here with these little ovals, they were perfect. And so I was able to get 2 cards from this. If you're enjoying the video, it would be great if you could hit the like button or maybe leave a comment below. That really helps YouTube know that you enjoy the video and it will spread to more people. Okay, I'm right at the tail end here and I am really focusing on all these little scraps that have got the same height. And I figured that I could use those, attach them to a white panel and then figure it out. So I didn't use a card sketch for these last few, but I have found when I've been creating cards that if you attach something to a white matting layer, suddenly things work. I have put a link here to another video that I think you might enjoy. Have a great day.